Okay, thanks for having me. So I am Michelle and I am a child life specialist. I've worked with children for over 20 years and I am here to talk about when conversations at home are difficult. So, conversations, we're going to be talking about more of the teen angle, but this could be a preteen as well. Children in general, but we're going to talk a little bit about the teen brain. So just so you're aware, the brain is under construction until 25. So we have a hard time sometimes figuring out why our children react the way that they do, why our teenagers struggle with decision making, or have a hard time kind of doing those problem solving things. Well, those connections are there for us as adults. So our children and our teenagers are trying to build those positive connections. So they're working from a different part of the brain. So it just takes a little bit longer. So be patient with them. Understand that they're not doing this stuff to be, to be difficult. It's their brain and it's under construction until 25. So we have the frontal lobe there in the teens is under construction, and that's where adults carry, that's where all our knowledge is. It's right there, ready to go. With our teens, it's not. So just being mindful. So we are thinking more with the rational part of the brain, and teenagers make decisions at the back of the brain, which is the emotional part. So, and if you've been to any of our other courses, we talk a lot about, emotion and rationale and how adults have a lot of rationale, and that's where we usually lead, where we're trying to explain things, we're trying to understand, where our children and our teens are more emotional, and that's just who they are. They lead with emotion, they act on emotion. The rationale part is not as developed. So that's why. So trying to step back a little bit and try to connect with them, their emotional side, try to remember what it was like, will help you with those connections, especially when it has been difficult lately for you guys. So building positive connections, and this can happen at any age. It doesn't need to be only with your teenagers, but it can be harder the older our children get. Sometimes they just start moving away. We start moving away from them because the behavior gets really tough. Sometimes the behavior triggers us. It could trigger them. And then we're just fighting a lot. So then we just start avoiding each other. So how do you come back? The reason we want you to come back and reconnect is because when the relationship is strained, then there's not a lot of buy-in from your child or teenager to be like, yeah, let's work this out. Let's talk about it. So this is a way to kind of come back, build that relationship back up again. Even if it's in an okay state, it's always great to connect with your kids and your teenagers because you're saying to them, I enjoy you. I want to hear more about you. So here are some ideas. Compliment them. Take a coffee break together. Hang out. Give them a hug. Check out some social media together. Just listen. Sometimes we need to jump in with advice and, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that. Just listen to what they have to say and try to remember what it's like to be their age, because that maybe was a good time for you, maybe it wasn't a great time for you, but trying to put yourself in their shoes will help you understand where they might be coming from and why they act and say the things that they do. So other things too is to pay attention and praise behavior that you would like to see more often. I notice how hard you're trying. You did a great job cleaning the bathroom. That was nice of you to make tea for us. That was fun hanging out. So just it's obvious, but it is nice. It's nice to hear from somebody that this was fun. I enjoyed spending time with you. Let's do this again. And when it is casual, when it is fun, our teens and our children will want to start hanging out with us more. And maybe it needs to be small little bits of time until you can build that up to be around each other a little bit more. But when there is friction, when you're having a hard time connecting, doing these fun things, noticing, praising that you're noticing their effort is going to start bringing you back together a little bit closer. So when you have to have those difficult conversations or you're trying to connect with them a little bit more to understand what's underneath the behavior, this will help that process. So when you're ready to sit down and have those conversations, things to be mindful of is the timing of your conversation. We sometimes want to do things in the moment, so that's never the time to have that conversation. You can validate, you can offer them a hug, ask them if they need space, but in the moment, not the best time to talk about, especially the difficult stuff. And then when we do go back to it, which we do want you to go back to it, timing of your conversation is important. We want to make sure that you're not needing to rush off somewhere, that you're not going to have somebody interrupting, another child needs your attention at that time, and just being mindful. Maybe we can't always be in a great mood, but you don't want to do it after a hard day or the child's had a hard day, and then we're going to try to have this conversation. Be mindful of your tone as well. Sometimes we're not aware of it, or parents sometimes will be, you're anxious, right? You have anticipatory anxiety. You're like, oh, this hasn't gone well in the past, or I want to talk to them. I'm not quite sure how to do this. And then we're kind of vibrating. Maybe we're smiling on the outside, but a lot of our kids are sensitive. They can pick up on that. And then our tone might be changing. So being able to approach your teen or your child, being mindful of your body language and your tone, and also be aware that they may not have the answers. So we want to sit down, we want to have these conversations. We want to say, things aren't going well, or, let's talk about this explosion that happened 2 days ago. And we usually ask the why question, which is a conversation blocker. So when we're trying to figure out what's going on and why are they acting this way, there are other ways to do it. So we're going to talk about that, other ways to connect with them. But being aware that they may not have the answers. They may not have the answers in the moment. And you might not have the answers yourself. So be okay with not having the answers and maybe needing to take a moment, or, I need to think about that. I never thought about that. Let's come back and have these conversations. And you don't need to know everything about their lives as well. Sometimes we get worried, we anticipate the worst, and we think that maybe they're doing things that they're not, or we want to know about every aspect. And sometimes we have to give them their autonomy. We have to give them their freedom and trust them, because that is part of a relationship. And if there isn't trust, then that relationship, we need to build that trust before we can kind of move on. So when you are talking to them, listen to understand, not to respond. This takes a lot of patience and our own self-control. So before you go in, be aware of your triggers. What is something that you can do in the moment to keep yourself calm so you don't react? Okay, we want to react with validation. We want to match their emotion. We don't want to be completely flat affect and just, stoic. But we don't want to get triggered and activated, and then we get upset, or maybe we shut down completely as well, or we're jumping in to justify what we did, why we did it. So just listen. And you might have to take notes. I mean, you ask them permission. Is it okay if I take notes? But just listening, just like we would with our adult friends. We listen to them. We don't jump in to interrupt or justify. So try to do the same thing with your teen. Okay, so just be aware of your reaction. You may not be aware, but something to be thoughtful, to be mindful of. Your kids may have told you, I don't want to talk to you, because then we end up talking for 3 hours, or the last time I got into trouble when I told you what happened. So, sometimes they don't want to open up because they're worried about what might happen or what your reaction may be because you've gotten angry before or there's been punishment. So it's not to say that you're not allowed to have emotion, but just being mindful of how you are coming across, and that we don't want to block that communication with your child. So their inability to answer you may activate you. And do not badger them into answering you. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, and you can't make someone share, and it actually will shut them down even more. So understand that this may take more than one conversation, and they may need some time to process and think about what's going on. Be aware of your own anxieties and how your words or actions may shut the relationship down or the conversation down. Sometimes we've had past experiences, maybe our other kids we've had trouble with, maybe in our own family, or, things have happened and we kind of think like, oh, this is going to happen. Or I've listened to other people and bad stuff has been going on. You anticipate that the worst thing might happen. So that's what we kind of think they are going to do. And if there's no proof to say that I've done anything wrong, now you're assuming that I'm going to do that. So, you know what? I don't want to talk to you. I'm annoyed. So just being mindful that sometimes our own anxieties, we sometimes can project onto our child and teen, and that can shut down that conversation. So be creative with communication. Try those nonverbal ways to communicate: a hug, a smile, rubbing their back. All those things send really positive messages, especially when you're trying to build rapport, sitting down close to them, doing something together. Communicate through writing or texting. Sometimes that can be easier and can keep emotions at bay because we're texting or we're writing. Being mindful that sometimes writing can be tough, because what are you going to do with my note? Where is it going to go? Are you going to share it with somebody? So making sure that you are keeping those things confidential, that it is something that both of you agreed on doing. And then talk while doing something else. So just like this picture here, they're coloring, they're doing something, and the focus isn't right on one-on-one, because sometimes that eye contact is a little uncomfortable. So sitting beside them, doing something, driving, walking, cooking dinner, coloring, usually the conversation will kind of flow a little bit easier. We're talking about other things, and then I'm going to bring up, the other day we had a really hard moment, and I just wanted to chat with you about that because I'm concerned that these hard moments are coming up more often, or I'm concerned that homework is still an issue, or I feel like we're just not communicating anymore. So these are ways that you can kind of say, look, something's coming up. I want to be able to talk about it. And then these are a little less threatening than let's sit down, let's look at each other, let's hash this out. So these are some ways to try. So some more writing. So these are really cool, and I've tried these with families before. And it's really cool to see what the answers may be. So you can have some sentence starters. It's hard for me to talk about. My favorite time we spent together was the changes in my life I want to talk to you about. So what you would do is you have these written out, you can print them out, and then Your child or teen can answer the ones that they want. The other thing that they can do is they can have an envelope for one parent, an envelope for the other parent. Maybe they want one of their siblings or a friend or a teacher. Who are these messages going to? And it can be a little less maybe intimidating. And they can share their thoughts and feelings and give it to you in an envelope, maybe not to read together, maybe to read together, but double check and see. And this is another way for them to communicate. So just be mindful not to overreact, try to really hear what they're saying without feeling like you have to get defensive or things like that. Maybe a shared journal or communication book. This is another great idea. One of our clinicians suggested to me, and I love it because like I said earlier, I've had a lot of teens say to me, like, I don't want to say anything because then it's going to turn into a 3-hour conversation. And I just want to say I've had a bad day and just end it at that. Do we have to get into why? What happened? What can I do? Who's bugging you? Just tell me what's going on. And then it's just like, oh, I really don't want to get into this right now. I've just had a bad day. And, trying to imagine what that's like when you've had a bad day and then you come home and somebody's going to try to fix it. And a lot of times we don't need it fixed. Majority of time, we don't want it fixed. We just need someone to hear us, someone to say, this is really hard, and to validate our feelings. So a shared journal may be a way to do that, to kind of come home and say, look, I got a 95 on my test and I was expecting 100. I studied really hard. Maybe for us, we're thinking 95, why are you upset about that? But for them, they're upset. So it's their way of communicating. And then you can respond back in the communication book. You can even say, if you want to talk about it, I'm here. Let me know if we wanted to talk about it. So can this be shared among all siblings too? More of a shared journal as a family? Absolutely, you can do that. I think I would bring that to the family to see, because some children are a lot more private. So especially if there's sibling conflict or rivalry, some children are just a little more open, right? They actually don't want to write about it. They'll talk about it, and other children, if they put something in there, they want it to be private for just their parents, for example. So I don't think it's a bad idea. I think it's a pretty cool idea. Maybe each sibling has their own tab, like in a journal, that you can just break that up with bookmarks or something like that. But again, I would bring it back to the family, because sometimes we have these great ideas, and if they're not into it, they're not going to use it. But yes, it can definitely be a cool thing. It could be a great way for siblings to communicate as well. Maybe you have something that goes up on your door, little sticky notes that you can put on their door. There's lots of ways to communicate that doesn't have to be verbal. So great ideas. It's just, is everybody on board, and how do we make this work? So that would be great for a family meeting, maybe talking to each child separately and then coming together as a family so everybody feels heard, and then say, what do you guys think about this? We feel like we're missing out on things, or you want to tell us stuff, and by the time we get home, we forget about it, or we're always rushing. So it would be a cool thing, and a cool way to keep memories as well. So this is another great way to find out what's going on for them, and we use this strategy a lot with teenagers. Now, I have had some teenagers color it all in and say, oh, I'm happy with one color, and then basically they're telling me, I don't want to do this. So you can try different things. Sometimes it doesn't work the first time. It doesn't mean that you don't try it again. It all depends on how you put it out there. If you say, look, I'm really struggling with trying to support you. I'm noticing that you're sleeping a lot more. You're not spending as much time with your friends, or that you're really agitated. You seem really upset. You don't come down for dinner, or you're out with your friends all the time. I'm just wanting to make sure it's okay. How do you feel about this? How do you feel about filling in your body with the emotions that are going on for you right now? And I've seen some teens really take this over and like have so much fun. I mean, I created this one. I'm not that creative with drawing, but I wanted to show you an example. But this is kind of what I've seen, and I've seen way better than this. So this kind of tells you, okay, this color is overwhelmed, this color is happy. So there's actually not a lot of happiness in this one. Noticing that there is a lot of anxiety. So how do we fill your body up with different emotions? What do you need from each emotion? So when you're feeling sad, what is it that will help you? What do you need from me? When you're feeling overwhelmed, what makes you feel better? What are some strategies that would help you? If your happiness scale is not that high and your body is not filled up with that much happiness, what can we do that when you're feeling a little bit lower, you're not feeling so great, what can we do that makes you feel happy? What makes you feel calm? So those are the kinds of things to think about and break it down. But again, this may take more than one conversation. So Jennifer Clary is a master's of social work, and she works in Toronto, and she wrote this book, and she talks about the calm technique, and it is a great technique to really get your kids to connect and get the conversation going. Because when you've got children that are struggling and they are of the age that they have some more insight, their brain is still under construction, but at least they have some more insight. They want to be able to share things with you, and then we sit down and have a conversation, and then the conversation doesn't go anywhere. So this technique will help you to open the door to the conversation. So the first is connecting. Before you jump into a conversation with your teen or child, you have to connect with them. So when we do that, it's saying, I'm hearing you. I understand. I'm trying to understand where you're coming from. Before we get into any problem solving or anything like that, we have to make sure that your child is like, okay, you're hearing me. I'm feeling understood right now. We want to match their affect, because it's very invalidating to have somebody kind of have a flat affect or kind of be like, I don't really get this, or being super happy and being like, I don't know why you're upset, because why are you upset? Like, we should just be happy. And that's really, really frustrating. So matching their affect, listening, and mirroring. So that's the same thing where we're kind of reflecting back what we're seeing and what we're hearing, so they know that they're being heard. Repeating what somebody says can be actually very powerful. I just feel like this house is really unfair. You treat me like I'm the adult of the house, and you treat my sibling like they can do no wrong. Wow. So you feel like it's really unfair here, and that I am babying your sibling. Yes, exactly. That's exactly how I feel, and it's unfair. So you've just repeated what they've just said back, but you're basically saying, is this what you're saying? Okay. Okay, so we want to show undivided attention, eye contact, using your body and your voice, leaning forward, looking interested and concerned. So matching that affect. When you do that, your child will automatically think, oh, finally, someone's listening to me, right? They want to feel heard. They want to know that someone is on their side. And you're matching the urgency expressed in your child's body language with your own. So that's that matching their emotion. They're emotional. We're thinking more rationally. Try to match their emotion. So lean in, show the affect that they are having. If they're having a temper tantrum, you don't need to lay down beside them and have a temper tantrum, but you can shed a tear if they're upset. I know I've done that lots of times with even adults, right? When someone's really sad and you end up getting teary yourself, that really is saying to somebody, you get it. When there's a disconnect between you and your child, or you just don't get what they're coming from, you can't fake that. This isn't something that you can fake. So by doing this, you're really showing them, I'm trying to understand where you're coming from. I'm really listening to you, and that will build the connection and get them opening up. And they're more likely to sit down and have that conversation with you again and work with you on creating a plan. Okay. So you want to put aside your agenda. It doesn't mean that your agenda is not important, but we have to be careful of when we do that. So connecting is saying, right now, I'm just focusing on what you want. I'm not jumping in with my stories. I'm not jumping in with my rationale. Because sometimes that does happen and parents get a little confused when we say, just be mindful. Because when, you are inserting stories about your own experiences, a lot of people think, well, I'm trying to tell them that I get it, but you have to connect first, because if you do it too soon in the conversation, then they feel like, oh, great, now you're making it about yourself, because sure, you had conflict too with your sibling. Well, that was 1,000 years ago, and this is now, so they just feel like you don't get it because you're the parent and things are different now. And we know a lot of times it's the same stuff. It doesn't matter what year it is but to them in that moment, they may find it off-putting. So you can use it. It's just making sure that you connect. And when your child reacts a certain way, that may be because they're feeling like now you are inserting it's now making it your issue and not my issue. Okay, so you can use those stories later, but just making sure that your child feels heard first. So parents want to be fixers, and it's hard. You see your child in distress, you see your teenager having a hard time. We want to jump in and fix, but it's not helpful and it's very invalidating. So in many cases, adults start reassuring the child, it's okay, don't worry about it, it's really not that bad. Really? Well, I'm feeling like it's really bad, and now you're telling me not to worry about it. So now I'm feeling confused, or maybe now I'm feeling agitated, or you know what? You don't get it. I'm not even going to bother. I'm just going to shut down. Everything's fine, and I'm out of here. Okay? Then we try to solve the problem possibly. Here, let's fix this. This is what you should do. And then those shoulds are really tough. We struggle with them as adults, kids struggle with them as well. And a lot of times they know what they've done wrong. And we don't need you to fix it right now. Like, I know what I should have done. Thanks, Captain Obvious. Like, I know I shouldn't have hit that kid, or I knew I shouldn't have screamed at my teacher, or I knew I was supposed to study. And now I have a 50 and it's going to bring my average down. Thanks for letting me know I should have studied, right? Like, I already know. So it can be really hard. It doesn't mean that your strategy doesn't work, but in the beginning of a conversation, if we're trying to make them feel heard, jumping in with fixing just makes them feel like you just think I just don't get this. You're just feeling like I'm a lost cause, right? It doesn't mean that it's true, but it may be where they're coming from. Or take some other alternatives, which is essentially brushing aside what the child is feeling and trying to express. Okay, so we're trying to stay in the moment, trying not to jump in and fix, just allowing them to feel heard. Okay, so a lot of head nodding, matching their affect, repeating what they've just said, active listening. Okay. So mirroring and affect, kind of explained that already. So when you connect, use your affect to reflect your understanding or truly listen. You're mirroring and creating a moment of deep connection. Okay, and that's really important. Like, this picture really depicts that. This woman is really wanting to try to understand, and you can see that they are connected. This is probably just a Photoshop, so it's a photo shoot, but they're really good at, showing that emotion. So when you're mirroring, you need to join with them in showing this emotion. It's important to look genuine and must appear sincere and not exaggerated or comical. Okay, so something that I mentioned before, you can't fake this. And if you fake it, they're not going to open up and they're going to get agitated. And the listening. Say the things your child might be saying as if you were in their shoes. So put yourself in your child's shoes. So this is right out of the book. And this is about going to the gym, like gymnastics. Okay, so the teenager probably wants to go to gymnastics. The parent is probably spending a lot of money to take them there, and they don't feel like going, right? So, what does the parent probably want to say? Look, you're the one that wanted gymnastics. I'm paying all this money. You're going, right? I know you don't feel like it now, but we're going anyway. And instead of doing that, instead of jumping in with the tone that is not very supportive, we want to really give them that notion that we are trying to understand where they're coming from. So here you are dragged into the car and making you go to gymnastics when you're perfectly happy at home. You're feeling like you're in control of your life, and I'm dragging you off somewhere you don't want to go. So this is a conversation that we're going to have, not necessarily in the car, but when maybe, a few days later, to say getting to gymnastics has been really tough. You're having a hard time, and you must be feeling like I'm just dragging you into the car. You just don't feel like going. You're perfectly happy at home. I'm noticing this is happening a lot. Tell me a little bit more about what's going on, because you really wanted to do gymnastics. And now I kind of feel like I'm just dragging you to get there. Okay. So connecting accurately reflects your child's affect. Listening to what he or she is actually saying are the three tools that, used in combination, create genuine mirroring and a sincere moment of deep connection. And that's what your teenager wants. That's what your children want. Everybody wants that. I want someone to really understand me, to put themselves in my shoes, right? So feeling heard is sometimes all we need as a child or teen. Yes, absolutely. And this comes from the mouth of babes, right? That this is what we hear as clinicians and as supporters of teenagers. They really, and youth, they really want to feel heard. And it can be really tough. And sometimes they make mistakes. And sometimes they make mistakes over and over again. And they feel defeated. Some will just act like, oh, I don't care, because they are feeling so defeated, and they're feeling embarrassment and shame. So we want to cover that up. So to us, we get frustrated and we think, what's the matter with you? Why are you acting this way? But when we say, why are you acting this way? We're saying you're doing it on purpose, and whatever you're doing is disappointing to me. And instead, it's like, I'm noticing this is happening on a regular basis. You seem really frustrated. How can I support you? Like, let's try to work this out. Can you tell me a little bit more what happened, or what do you think gets in the way? And asking some of those questions they may not know, but let's talk about it. Let's put it out there and not do the shaming and blaming, and try to open up the conversation so we can create a plan together. But these conversations are really hard, and some kids just don't want to do it because they don't want to feel that shame. They don't like feeling this emotion, and they want to keep it hidden. Right? So we're just going to fluff it off. I don't want to talk about it. It's going to bring up more emotion. So we really have to be patient. Okay, so I did a lot of talking, and if anybody has any questions, please put them in the chat, and I'm happy to answer.
While we wait for some questions, I can do a little bit of the wrap up from the FamilySpace side of things. So today's session was recorded, so the recording will be sent out once it's posted in a few days or so, along with the different resources that go along with the session. And you will receive that in the same that you receive the sign-up email as well as a link for today. So look very similar. Again, thank you, Michelle, for facilitating this session and fostering that conversation with us, and allowing me to share my youth perspectives as well in having difficult conversations with my own family. I usually bring in the youth perspective in the work that I do at Linwood, so it's great to see both sides, and for family members to really just hear us out when they need it the most. So hopefully this was helpful, and thank you again, Michelle. It doesn't seem like there's any questions, so I think we'll wrap it up for today. Thanks everyone for joining as well.
Absolutely. Mhm. Okay, awesome. I see someone writing, but it may be, I don't know if it's a question or just a thank you. Oh, yes, the texting is great help with my oldest. Amazing. That's good. And you just have to find what's the best thing and open up those conversations and wait until they've cooled down just to say,
Thanks,
look,
everyone.
this didn't go well. Let's chat. So thank